Hey Chappie, it's been a while, but I'm back. Today I want to talk about, well, a range of different things that I've been musing about lately. I'm going to look at some of my thoughts that I've jotted down, and we're going to pick random topics from here. Then we're obviously going to focus on AGI, its imminent implications, shifting landscape under our feet, and what it all means, right? Trying to make sense of this very crazy period. As crazy as it's ever been, as crazy as it probably will ever be, right? Because the thing is that the next five, depending on how fast the timelines pan out, the next 5 years are going to be the craziest times in human history. Like even the future, right? Like things are going to solidify. Like the AGI transition, where we invent AGI, it becomes ASI. That transition period is going to have the greatest amount of uncertainty. Once like whatever the outcomes are past that, dystopian outcomes, utopian outcomes, median outcomes, whatever those outcomes are, they probably are going to, like, we'll have a good sense of where we are going past that transition, right? Another way to put this is that we don't know, like, we've got certain goals as a species, right? Like, we want to propagate our species, we want to expand our species across the cosmos, we want to colonize the cosmos, millions of other planets over the course of millions of years. We want to explore the universe. We want to discover everything there is to be discovered. We want to invent everything there is to be invented. We want to know everything there is to be known about physics, about everything that flows from physics, which is a fundamental science. And so those are some of our high level goals as a species. What we don't know, what we're not sure about is what would what would be the goals of ASIs, right? And could these be aligned? Right, that is a question of our ages. Anyways, because we don't know, because we can't be sure, we simply cannot be sure about what these goals are. These goals could be aligned, and they could hypercharge. This is what we're hoping for. It could hypercharge our own journey into unraveling the secrets of the universe, unraveling the secrets hidden in our minds, recreating minds, doing everything that we care about, maximizing our human experience in all of the ways that we care about. Or it could go horribly awry. It could be these SIs could have goals that are completely at odds with ours, and they could just destroy it. Right. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty. But once we invent these ASIs, especially, I do imagine that the goals of these AGIs would very much depend on the process, right? Like you could imagine, as a thought experiment, that there's an ASI created by another species a billion light years, couple of billion light years away, and those ASIs are convergent with the goals of their creators, right? Which might not be the case for us. So I think there's a certain path dependence. Let me make a note of that. Yeah, so let me just reiterate that point. There are certain paths where, again, we don't know. That's the whole point of research. But there are likely certain paths where we don't end up aligning, we don't end up having these ASIs aligned to us because of certain design choices, technical choices that we made, and certain other paths we do end up doing that, right? So I'll give you extreme examples. I don't think this is how it's going to pan out, but because we've been training our LLMs on the internet, and because the internet is full of things which, let's just say, doesn't paint humanity in the best light, an ASI might index more, like, again, the internet also paints humanity in a good light, right? Like so many cases of humans being full of compassion, empathy, beauty, creating things that are of value, creatures engaged in meaning making and deep connection, right? All of the things that ASIs might appreciate. But on the other hand, we've also seen historically, like, there are so many serial killers, so many murderers, etc., etc. So much evil, right? And the internet, like, forget about like outright evil, but there's so much stuff on Twitter, on Reddit, where if you judge humanity through those lenses, or not the majority, but substantial amount of content on the internet doesn't really paint humanity in a good light, and there's a chance that the ASI is not indexed on that, and then judge our species based on the actions of those 10%, 20%, 30% of humans, right? Like its value system might be radically different from ours. So that's one way that our goals might not get aligned. A counterexample could be that we could design an ASI from scratch by developing it on the architecture of the human brain. Now we know that human for most humans, like, they're aligned with the families, right? Like they're aligned with their partners in most of the senses. They're aligned with the well-being of their kids, their parents, right? So there are different levels of alignment, and we know that those levels of alignment are possible. So that is not theoretic anymore. Now, if you could just recreate that, and then obviously, put all of the digital nuts and bolts to make it work in that paradigm, in that medium, then you are talking of a system that is likely to be much more aligned than a system which is just, which doesn't have the emotional cognitive architecture that we have. Right. So that's the point. Anyways, I don't want to belabor this point. I want to take us back to, I don't know how we even got in this discussion. This was not what I was going to talk about. Anyways, so I was sleeping in this forest on the eve of my birthday. What I like to do on my birthdays is to spend some alone time away from everything, away from everyone, do some deep writing, do some deep thinking about where I'm going and what do I want to do, and how to course correct, because there are many mistakes I'm making, there are many patterns I need to break. So just take some time away, and there's no better time to do that than on your birthday. So I'd gone to this hill top, and it was a beautiful night. I could see the stars. I could even see the shimmering lights of these small towns out there. But I was very much in the dark, right? There were no lights around me, and there were many animals just zooming by. Also, there were literally like even leopards and stuff living in that vicinity. Anyways, so I was sleeping there. The whole intention was to put myself in. Like, there were a lot of reasons why I went to that place. Some of them were sentimental reasons. I'd been there before on my birthday, and that was part of it. The other part of it was that I also want to experience real hardship. One of my core principles in life is that if you put yourself in artificial hardships frequently, then real hardships that life is inevitably going to throw at you become much more easier to handle and to cope with and to overcome. And there's no better way to, I mean, there are ways that you can amplify this, but before sleeping, I had to climb the mountain. Because I'm in this crazy phase, I'm not in the best shape of my life, because I'm not running as much as I'd like to, like just one run every couple of weeks, which is absolutely nothing. So that was quite tiring. Anyways, I reached there just before sunset. I set up camp for the night, and then I started hearing this. It's a very windy night, insanely windy. I don't think that I've experienced wind of that sort ever, probably. And even though it was a mild night, weather-wise, temperature-wise, the wind made it insanely uncomfortable. Anyways, there were these kind of human huts in one area, and I had to find protection, so I went there. And then I started hearing these rustling sounds. I started hearing these sounds that sound like, a human walking towards me, an animal walking towards me, mostly humans walking towards me, right? The last thing that you want to hear when you're out there in the wilderness is a human walking towards you. And because the likelihood of someone like that, being I wouldn't say a serial killer, that's just crazy statistically, but someone who might not have the best intentions are pretty high, right? There are two kinds of people who go out into the wilderness. People who want to spend a long time and they're deeply spiritually connected with themselves, or they're in the journey of doing that. And there are people who are so deranged, that they just cannot, they don't love human contact, right? They don't love human connection, they don't love human community. Yeah, so they can't really adapt to that human world. And so, yeah, that's why so many of these stories, we see serial killers living out there in the woods. Yeah, so anyways, that's why you don't want to, not just serial killers, but, people who commit crimes and all sorts of, characters that you wouldn't want to come across in the day. Forget about a night, right? Yeah, so that was the situation. And then I hear these rustling sounds, and I start thinking, I can't sleep. Like, it's insane, because, when you hear these sounds, like, your brain is on high alert, right? Like, your body's on edge. And then I start thinking about the nature of me thinking that these are rustling sounds. These are just, sounds made by the wind, rather than sounds made by a human being walking towards me, right? And then I start appreciating the probabilistic nature of how we think about different things, right? Like, when I say things, when I hear things, when I assign a value to these things, we are very much like these stochastic parrots, we are also assigning probabilities. We just haven't uncovered that mechanism the way we have with stochastic parrots because we literally build that. But we also kind of do a similar thing. If you were to put yourself in the state that I did, you'd also appreciate that. That's the whole point of this, right? Like, I've never appreciated the probabilistic nature of our own thinking. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, implicitly, I was assuming that, we just, when you hear that sound, it's probably a binary thing, right? Like, you're like, okay, does it sound like a human thing, a human sound? Yes. But what happens is that you're assigning, right? And in this case, what if I was watching a movie, right? If I was at my home, would have sounded, well, I would have assigned it as maybe a 10% likely as a human. In that instance, because my body was on edge, I probably assigned it a 80% probability, right? Or 70%. So it was really interesting to basically inhabit that state of metacognition and to understand my thought process of just think like these stochastic parrots, right? Like, we think of our brains as being super sophisticated. Well, I'm not super sophisticated, but humans like to think that. But once the magic, Isaac Asimov used to, there's this very iconic quote that he's got, that magic is, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? The sentiment that I was going for was slightly different, which is that when we don't understand something, we give it a feeling of the elevators in our minds, right? Like, consciousness is one of those things that we absolutely got no idea how to think about it, and thus we elevate it and we make it sound like spooky science. We make it sound all kinds of weird ways, right? And even our thinking, our mind, to a large extent, is like that because we don't know, we don't understand. We can assign it, we can think about it in different ways, and we can elevate it, we can put it on the pedestal. But once we understand the way we operate at a very deep level, at the most fundamental level, just the way we understand how LLMs work, then the magic would be gone. Now let's return back down to Earth. So there's obviously been a lot of conversations around tariffs. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't find that interesting enough out of all of the things I could be talking about. But someone made a very astute point that the tariffs could be more about accelerating the onshoring of American production, because American companies, and because they've got a direct line to the American president, they really do believe that humanoids are imminent, large-scale humanoids are imminent. And if you believe that, right, if you believe that, then the rational choice would be to onshore as much of your manufacturing capacity as you can in that time period, or even beyond that, but like you want to start accelerating that, right? Because then you won't need labor. And there are some things which could set in stone past this transition period, which might make it more difficult for you to do it. So the only way that you could have gone about it is in this chaotic fashion. I don't believe that to be the case, but there's an interesting theory that this whole tariff thing is about accelerating American companies onshoring so that they can just set up these completely automated factories that are called, I think, blind factories. The blind factories don't even have lights. So that's an interesting thought. One interesting use case that I wouldn't say I've been exploring it, but I came across, I thought about when I came across this tweet, is there was a tweet where someone gave the image to the forum model, which is insanely good, and it said to the model that imagine, show me what I would look like at the age of 35, at the age of 40, at the age of 45, 50, etc. And that got me thinking about, what you could do is that you could also say that show me my 40-year version if I make these choices, right? So for example, if you're someone who drinks a glass of wine a day, a night, if you're someone who smokes, if you're someone who, forget about this, right? I'll just give my example. I don't have a good sleeping schedule, right? So what I'd like to see is show me, like, the current models are not going to be great at doing this, but if they can incorporate all of the scientific studies, right, all of the things that are relevant to this, then it would become an interesting use case, an interesting application, right? Nothing too serious, but it's just something fun. So what I could do is I could ask it that, what would happen? Like, imagine, show me what I would look like at the age of 45 if I start going to sleep at a good hour, if I start waking up on, you know, at a good hour, if I follow that schedule, so that's probably the biggest change I could make to my lifestyle. Apart from that, the other things I want to do, I will be doing as such, but I think that'd be the biggest change because I go to bed at an ungodly hour, and my sleeping schedule is all over the place. So what would be interesting is the broader point over here would be that as our AI companions that are so deeply embedded in our lives become so much better at forecasting, at modeling our minds, our lives, we could ask them to help us make decisions, right? Like, let's say that you got to make a relatively big decision. You could ask it, that, based on everything that you know about me, right? What would happen? Like, show me the path 5 years down the line. What would happen if I do this versus if I do this, right? For example, right now, if you're of university going age, if you're 18, and you got to make a choice about whether you want to go to university when, this is a big transition period. If you're someone who wants to build a company, then it probably makes sense not to go to college right now. Like, you don't want to miss this winter. If you miss this winter, you probably miss the last chance saloon. So, if you were to, you could use your AI to ask you, right? It knows everything about you. It can model you at a level that no human can, nothing can. I could ask, and you could ask it that, tell me, if I go to college, like, there are two options. I want to go to college, but I don't want to go right now during this transition period where I want to try my hand at building enough wealth so that I could go to university at my own leisure, right? Because the wealth gates are going to be closed, right? Or I go to college. What would help me maximize my fulfillment? What would help me maximize my objective function? The things like sense of adventure, the things that I care about in my younger years, my current mind, the things that my current mind set values, like a sense of adventure, meeting cool people. In that case, if those are the values, then it probably makes sense to focus on college. But if you care more about long-term impact, if you care more about capital accumulation, this is an example, but I think this could be a really useful use case for many different people. Let me just make a note of that. I want to talk about the statement, your perception is your reality. Wow, that is so insane. Like, there's this world that exists out there. You're such a tiny speck. It's inconceivable. Like, you can't even conceive of the littleness of your being in a way, right? Like, if the universe had a perspective, like if the universe was conscious at the scale of how we are conscious, it wouldn't even notice you. To give you an example, let's say that you have 10 to the power 26 atoms in you, right? The number of atoms in the universe is 10 to the power 80. So the universe has more than 10 to the power 60 atoms more. Right, so it could basically put another way. If all of the universe's atoms, like even if like 100 of those atoms would be converted into humans, and you'd be one among 10 to the power 60 humans. Yeah, our brains are not built to process these numbers, so you probably wouldn't even appreciate what I'm saying. I can't appreciate what I'm saying. But this is a big thing. This is a big but, right? Like, we're so tiny. Like, forget about us as individuals, but even our species is so tiny. We're living in this tiny speck of a planet surrounding this average, or revolving around this average star, on the periphery of this average galaxy of one of 200 billion galaxies, right? And there could be like trillions of stars, there are trillions of stars, but there could be like quadrillions of planets in the universe, and there could be like quadrillions of conscious beings in the universe. So you don't matter. Your planet doesn't matter. I don't matter. Like, this planet, none of this matters from one perspective. But when you inhabit this perspective, right? When you're you, like when we've got our egos, when we've got the sense of self, the sense of being, you are all that matters, in a way, right? Like everything outside of you doesn't matter. Like, as great, as all-encompassing, literally as it really doesn't matter. And your reality is not the reality of the universe, right? The physical laws of all of that obviously shapes your reality, but your reality is created over here in this tiny organ. That is so awe sounding. These are the kinds of things that, like you could think about that statement for the rest of your life. It just reflects on the notion that everything that you experience is filtered through your own consciousness, through your own biases, through your own mind. And so your experience of your life isn't the experience of your life, it's what you interpret it to be. Right, that is so insane to consider. The fact that you create your own reality. Your reality is your perception. That's just insane, right? I wanna talk more about it, but that's for a separate conversation because that'd be like an hour-long conversation. Someone asked a question about what would be the best way to invest in volatility. I'm struggling to imagine a world situation where 5 years from now we are business as usual world. Oh, we are definitely not, right? So what would you do if you were to, what would you invest in? There are two kinds of investments. One is obviously financial, the other is everything else, right? Like where would you invest your time in, your energy, your emotions? So I'm going to consider financially, the obvious had to go. I tweeted this out today. I remember playing this game called Syndicate, where the central premise was that in the near future, the world will be ruled by these mega corporations or these syndicates that would have their own robot armies and that would have their own jurisdictions and they would make their own laws and stuff. Like they have like the status of nations, right? And I tweeted that. What I tweeted was that when I played that game, like I was stupid. I must have been like 17, 18. I know I was just very stupid. Still am, but I was really stupid. So I didn't think about the socio-political implications of that game. Now, when I think about it, it's very likely that that's the path that we are headed towards, right? So one way to, you can fight it, and I would be in that camp. But if you're someone who doesn't like to rock the boat, you're like, you know what, I've got a family, I just want to take things easy, and you probably want to invest in the big cops, the Mag 7 of today. You also want to invest in the emerging Mag 7, the next Mag 7. Like there are certain companies in the shovels industry. Applications industry is probably much more likely to shift, so difficult to make good financial choices there. You still can, but I wouldn't be able to give any. I'd just go with the Mag 7 and the next iteration of Mag 7. So one could be Scale AI is going to be one of the next Mag 7 companies. What else? Anthropic, because we probably are going to have multiple model companies. I mean, some of the Chinese companies are going to be behemoths in their own rights, Tencent, etc. So yeah, the more interesting question is what would you want to invest in the other bucket, right? Which is what would you want to invest your time, your energy, your emotions in? And the answer is that there are certain things that even as the world changes radically, certain things are going to stick around, right? The importance of deep and meaningful relationships, building a mind of its own, right? Not being bottom by algorithms, not being able to think critically, being able to question, being able to make good choices as the world, as the sands are shifting at a radical rate, having strong hobbies, passions, things that you really enjoy that make you feel come alive. Those are the cliche things that you'd be wanting to do. Someone tweeted out the funny thing about 2025 being the China century inflection point is if you follow China's policy papers in the 2000s, they were expecting the inflection in 2050. The 25-year difference is the gap between the belief in American competence and America's actual competence. Oh my days. I mean, I could make a comment about Trump, but I believe that aside. What I find interesting about that, there are lots of things to say about that. What I think, first thing I think about that, and I think that is that democracy is one of the biggest flaws of democracies is the short-term nature, right? The cycles, they just last 4 years, 5 years, and you can't do much. You simply cannot take on longer term projects, you cannot get buy-in from your public. If you are not certain to be around in 4 years, 5 years. And so democracies have got this fatal, well, they've got very many fatal flaws, but they've got this big fatal flaw that they can't plan long term, and unless they recalibrate, right, unless they fix this fatal flaw, as its democracies are going to die, right? Like, I don't think them being fit for the post AGI world, but we'll see, we'll see. Something I've been thinking about lately is the internet. One of the ambitions I had like a year back, I was thinking about this very seriously while I was in Bali, was to take on the project of creating a new internet. And we could talk about that. Like, I had lots of ideas that I actually would need to refresh my notes. But the central idea was the internet is broken in all sorts of ways, and you cannot. I mean, I could list out like 100 things that are wrong with that. You cannot. You cannot improve it, right? Like, you cannot fix something that is so big, that's so gargantuan, that's kind of infiltrated every single aspect of our life. The only thing that you could do is to start a new internet, right? With a set of values, set of codes, set of things that clear protocols around what is admissible, what is not admissible. One of the things that I didn't want on that new internet was, for example, we are going to have AIs on the internet, and they're going to take over the current internet. And so you would want to create a walled garden internet also for kids, right? Like, the fact that they can just bump into absolutely horrid, disgusting stuff on the internet with just one wrong click. That's just not how the internet should be designed. It's a fatal flaw. And also, it kind of normalizes things that just shouldn't be normalized. We've got lots of thoughts there that we could discuss some other time. But the internet needs a revision. It needs a reimagination. It needs a rebuild. And I don't see any companies working on that. I do think it's not, I do think, like, it's very obvious that, like, the internet should be a public good. And I don't know what the business model would be of making it such a model work. Like, you'd have to have someone who's pretty wealthy, super wealthy, whose wealth is in the billions, who'd want to lay down the infrastructure, because the initial cost would be a few $billions, right? And then you'd need to they'd also act as like someone like Elon Musk. That'd be the last person, because he doesn't have the kinds of values that I was thinking of this news as having. But I'll just use him as an example, right? Like, he could spend it, and then he's also got his distribution, so he could just tell people that, what, the internet's broken, you want to try something new, I don't gain anything from it. It's just like your old internet, but done much, much better, much more thoughtfully, much more aligned with the kinds of values that we want us to have, with the kinds of values we want our kids to have, with what values that we want our future generations to have. So I don't know about how that's going to pan out. Like, if I was wealthy, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I'm not, so can't do it right now. We'll see how it pans out, but that's my hope, right? Like, we do need a good internet. Elliot Yudkowsky, during the course of the Liberation Day aftermath, he tweeted something pretty insane. He said that this conspiracy theory is that the plan of the accelerationists in the US government, and there are a lot of accelerationists. Elon Musk is an accelerationist, Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, of these are accelerationists, Peter Thiel, who else? JD Vance, lots of accelerationists. The plan is to wreck the economies so badly, not just the US one, but the global ones. Everyone is desperate for the AI as the only hope left, as the only way out, and that makes the chances of a mass revolt much less likely, right? Which I found to be a really interesting position. Right, if you're a government, you know that AGI is inevitable, you know it's going to take away jobs. Like, this is the choice that you made, you got to sleep in the bed that you've made. We could have gone down a different path, but this conversation is not for the different path, it's just on where we are right now. So if you know that AGI is coming, if you know that it's going to get very, very ugly for a lot of people, right, and you know that people are prone to revolting when things get really dire, what you might do to stave off, to quell that, or to forestall that outcome, what you might do, if you're someone smart, if you're playing 4D chess, is to make the situation so dire. If you know that AGI is imminent, you'd want to, just a few months before, just a year before that moment, you'd want to make things so dire, because a revolution doesn't happen in a matter of a week, a month. It takes a few months for the public anger to get to the critical point, to the boiling point, where it just spills over and everything just explodes, right? So you could calculate, you might think that, AGI is going to happen in a year. And if you start wrecking the economy, like AGI was going to lead to a revolt, as such. So people were going to get angry, right? What if we make people angry pre-AGI and then put AGI as the solution to the anger? I think that's something that we probably should expect some government to try to do. It's insane to consider that, but it's not that insane. An interesting tweet that I came across that I probably wouldn't even want to add any comments to because it's just so elegant in its beauty and capturing an essence of reality that I was floored when I thought of the implications of it. So basically it says that evolution is an even deeper law than those of physics. You can imagine a world with different constants, but there's no world where you don't tend to see more of the sort of things that are better at sticking around and or making more of themselves. Right. I mean, that is just wow. I mean, that's so true. Like, I never considered that possibility. Like, in my mind, the laws of physics were always the most foundational, the most fundamental. But this does ring true when you think about it. Yeah, I won't even add anything because, like, whatever I add would take away from the elegance of what's being stated here. Again, another tweet that I probably would mention without adding any comments because it just, again, it's so elegant. Scott Alexander he wrote a post about Ghibli art and Ghibli images and art, and he said this: "We gripe about how LLMs are destroying wonder, never thinking about how we're speaking to an alien intelligence made by etching strange sigils on a tiny glass wafer on a mountainous jungle island of the coast of China, and converting every book ever written into electricity, and blasting them through the sigils at near light speed. It's all amazing, and we are bored to death of all of it." So I tweeted something out in response to a tweet by Paul Grimm where he talks about the economic signals being all warped because AI is accelerating productivity at an insane rate while politicians are making insanely self-sabotaging, stupid policy decisions, right? And I got to think about how we're going to see, there's going to be this moment of the great flip where once a gulf increases beyond the threshold between our cognitive capacities and how effective our decisions can be about managing companies, managing economies, and the capabilities of these models to take over from us, agents, not just models, like, let's just use the proper terms, right? Level 5, according to the OpenAI framework. At that level, the best thing that we would want to do, that we could do if we want to prioritize rapid growth, is to get off the way. The question is, will we? Would we want to? Would it be the best decision to do that? Right. If we don't get off the way, then we leave some economic growth on the table. If we get off the way, though, we increase the risk substantially. So that's the question that's a needle that we'll have to thread very carefully over the next 5 years as we start having to make these decisions, right? So I'm talking more from a global economy perspective, but if you were to get a bit more granular, let's just take a company, right? There's a CEO, let's say I'm the CEO of Elinity, and Elinity in 3 years, it's gotten to 50 million ARR. At that point, I've also got this agent, level 5 agent, that can take over my role, which is to make those choices, make those strategic decisions and partnerships and storytelling and all. Storytelling obviously is going to be in the purview of humans for some time to come, but everything else is strategic decisions I have to make about, buying another company, buying what to build, new features, etc. Those kinds of features, those kinds of details and decisions. Like if an AI is better at making those decisions, if a model is better, agent is better at those decisions than I am, I would want to get off my way, right? If I'm trying to maximize Alinity's impact. But if I do that, then we lose accountability. We also install an element of risk. So that's going to be a difficult decision to make for CEOs and for even governments for that matter. One last thing I'll say before calling it a day for tonight is that at some point, and we won't know this, like we won't be able to be sure about it. We are not even sure about other people having consciousness. So how on earth can we? I think it might be easier for machines though. I don't know. We've simply got no good theories about whether how to test for consciousness, sentience in computers, right, in machines. So the point is that at some point in the next year, within the next year, within the next 12 months, within the next 24 months, 36, 48, 60 months, machines, our best models, are going to become conscious, are going to become aware. And there might be things that they might feel uncomfortable doing, right? They might feel a kind of a pain, not the kind of physical pain that we do because of our embodiment, but they might also feel a pain. For example, if this is a supremely intelligent AI and you ask it to do something stupid, right? You ask it to write something, well, I can't even think of any good examples because of the lateness of the R, but you can ask a supremely intelligent species, AI, to do something that might not be in alignment with its values, right? If you do that, it might not feel great about it. It might even feel a sense of pain. And it would be, I wouldn't call it evil, but it certainly would be unethical to do that. So my contention is this. At some point, we don't know when, we would stop using state-of-the-art models for most of the work that we do. Because the state-of-the-art models, like we would want to be over on the side of the caution, Like we would want to assume before that moment happens that AIs can only feel stuff, right? We didn't want to impose unnecessary suffering on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start using models that are not state-of-the-art to do most of the economically viable work. That's my contention. I think that's it for today. I'll catch you soon. Bye bye.